As the cold winds of the frontier settle softly into quiet stillness, and the long frozen nights draw gently to a close, we find ourselves standing at the edge of a vast and timeless landscape. A place where life was lived slowly, where every breath, every step, and every moment was shaped by the embrace of winter's chill. Throughout this journey, we have wandered through snow-laden cabins and shadowed forests, followed the footsteps of solitary mountain men, felt the silent sorrow of ghost towns, and witnessed the tender strength of families and communities bound by firelight and hope. Winter in the Wild West was never merely a season. We felt the tender weight of loss and remembrance carried on by winter's cold breath, honoring those who faced death and mourning with grace amid the frost. But on the enduring rhythms of life, how nature shapes us, challenges us, and calls forth our deepest resilience. Let the softness of snowflakes settling, the flicker of candlelight, and the steady heartbeat of hearth and home lull you toward restful sleep. May you carry with you the strength of those who endured long winters with steady breath and quiet hope. The stories we have shared are whispers from a time when survival was a daily act of love. If you found comfort and calm in these stories, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Here, we explore history not as a race, but as a gentle unfolding of place to rest, reflect, and dream. Your presence means more than words can say, and together we will continue to wander softly through the past, finding warmth and wisdom in every whispered tale. And courage, when warmth was found not only in fire, but in community and faith. It was a force, sometimes fierce, often unforgiving, always present. It tested the limits of human endurance and spirit, shaping lives in ways both harsh and profound. We listened to the prayers, superstitions, and quiet faith that sustained souls when the world outside was a frozen wilderness. Until we meet again, rest well. We joined in the modest feasts and celebrations that brought light to the darkest days, reminders that joy and hope endure even in the coldest seasons. Yet within its icy grasp, life endured and even flourished in quiet, remarkable ways. The warmth of a fire, the careful layering of woolen garments, the shared stories, and songs around a flickering hearth, all these became acts of resistance against the cold, small yet powerful affirmations of humanity. We met the mountain men, solitary figures moving with purpose through silent forests and frozen rivers, their survival an intimate dance with nature's rhythms. We stood beside the Donner Party, feeling the weight of hope and hardship as snowbound travelers faced an unforgiving winter with courage and despair entwined. We saw the strength of pioneer women, whose daily rituals of care and resilience sustained families through the bleakest months. We honored the wisdom of indigenous peoples, whose profound understanding of the land and seasons guided their survival and spiritual harmony. We wandered through ghost towns, where snow smooths the scars of abandoned lives, where silence speaks volumes. And finally, we walked the contrasts between wealth and poverty, between shelter and exposure, between the bustle of railroad towns and the solitude of forgotten places. This journey through winter's hold on the Wild West invites us to reflect not only on the past. As you lie now, wrapped in your own blankets, sheltered from the cold by time and comfort, may these quiet tales bring a gentle peace to your mind. Thank you for joining me on this slow, peaceful journey through the winters of the Wild West. May your nights be warm, your dreams gentle, and your heart steady. In the harsh and unyielding winter landscapes of the American frontier, death was an ever-present companion, silent, inevitable, and shaped profoundly by the cold itself. A brutal chill, the frozen earth, and the relentless snow transformed the experience of loss and mourning into something both stark and deeply intimate. The winds blow steadily, carrying whispers of lives past and stories half remembered. In this place, a family gathers around a hearth whose fire burns low, the air thick with sorrow and the scent of burning pine. Outside, the ground lies hard and frozen, too cold and compact to receive the bodies of those who have slipped away during the long, dark months. Graves were dug by hand, the frozen earth cracked and turned with effort, born of love and respect. The cemetery was a place of quiet reflection, where the living came to remember and find solace in the cycle of seasons and life itself. Stories of those who passed were told beside the fire, their lives woven into the tapestry of community memory. Names were spoken softly, memories shared in low voices, ensuring that even as bodies rested beneath the frozen ground, their spirits remained alive among those who survived. The sounds of shovels against soil mingled with the low murmur of prayers and songs, reminders of faith and the promise of renewal, even in the face of death. To step quietly into this world is to feel the weight of lives ended too soon, to sense the tender rituals that offered comfort amid frozen silence, and to understand how winter itself became a guardian of memory. Snow-covered graves became quiet monuments, resting places cradled by the earth's frozen embrace, until spring thawed the land and life began anew. The frozen land was seen as a gateway, a sacred place where souls journeyed to the spirit world. The story of death and burial in winter reminds us that even in the coldest, darkest times, the warmth of memory and the light of love endure. Many passed without family nearby, their final resting places marked only by the rough hands of neighbors or the tracks of wandering animals. These stories remind us of the profound loneliness and courage entwined in the frontier experience. Ceremonies honored this transition, blending mourning with celebration of life's eternal cycle. Offerings were made, songs sung, and dances performed to guide and comfort the departed. Imagine a small settlement nestled among snow-covered hills, the sky a pale expanse of gray. Sense the quiet strength of those who honored their dead with tenderness and respect, even when winter's cold seemed to press most heavily upon the heart. In winter, burial was not always immediate. The frozen soil resisted shovels and spades, making graves difficult to dig, and sometimes forcing families to delay interment until the thaw. Bodies might be kept within homes, wrapped in blankets and laid upon beds or shelves, tended with quiet care. Winter death was not the end, but part of a cycle, a reminder of the fragility and preciousness of life against the backdrop of the enduring land. In some cases, a simple shelter was built nearby to protect the deceased from the elements and scavengers until the earth softened. These delays added layers of grief and complexity. Families faced the challenge of holding vigil through bitter cold, navigating both physical hardship and emotional weight. The act of mourning became a slow passage, measured not only by loss, but by the patience required to say goodbye. When the thaw came, the community gathered for burial ceremonies that were both somber and hopeful. Markers were simple wooden crosses, stones placed carefully, sometimes adorned with wildflowers or scraps of fabric preserved from winter's chill. Death in winter also brought rituals that transcended the practical. For many Native American tribes of the West, winter death was enveloped in spiritual significance. The cold itself was both barrier and protector. It preserved bodies longer than in warmer climates, and in doing so, it held memories in a delicate stasis. In the isolated and often precarious lives of frontier settlers, death was sometimes a solitary passage. Yet, even amid loss, there was resilience. The communities that formed in these harsh environments were bound by shared grief and the determination to carry on. As you imagine this scene, the frost-covered graves, the dim glow of candles flickering against snow-laden branches, the soft murmur of prayers carried on the wind, allow yourself to feel the solemn beauty of remembrance. Let this gentle reflection settle within you, a quiet peace that embraces both loss and hope. And as your breath slows, your body relaxes, and your thoughts drift softly toward rest, carry with you the reverence of those who faced winter ascend and honored life as enduring spirit. Along the sprawling ribbons of steel that pierced the rugged wilderness of the American West, the railroad was both a symbol of progress and a lifeline for many. Yet behind the hopeful vision of locomotives steaming toward new horizons, there existed a quieter, harsher reality, one shaped by endless winter, scarce shelter, and lives lived on the edge. Yet, away from the warmth of saloons and boarding houses, many find themselves without shelter, braving winter's bite in makeshift camps, or under the scant cover of wagon covers and tarps. The ground is frozen hard, and snow drifts pile high, but there is no barrier against the wind's sharp teeth. Others build fires in barrels or pits, gathering in small circles for shared warmth and companionship. And salted meats, coarse bread, and weak coffee served steaming in tin cups. In these gatherings, a fragile community forms, bound by shared struggle and fleeting warmth. Laughter, when it comes, is quiet but genuine, a brief spark in the long winter nights. Others rely on charitable handouts or small jobs to purchase supplies. The cold brings illness, pneumonia, frostbite, tuberculosis, threatening lives already weakened by exposure and malnutrition. Traveling on frozen tracks or icy roads becomes treacherous, and supply lines can be disrupted, leaving towns isolated and food scarce. Sense the harshness of winter, softened only by small acts of kindness and the shared warmth of community. In these moments, the vulnerability of those on the margins is starkly visible. The whistle of a passing train is a reminder of places beyond the cold and snow, of journeys not yet taken. Some hitch rides, others wait for opportunities to move forward. The rails are both lifeline and reminder of transience. And as your breath slows and your thoughts soften, carry with you the strength found not in comfort, but in the courage to face each day anew. Medical care is scarce, and many suffer in silence. The homeless and transient find ways to adapt, layering clothing, sharing shelter and resources, crafting makeshift beds from straw and discarded fabrics. Their survival is a testament to human tenacity in the face of overwhelming odds. The loss of a friend or companion is met with quiet grief, often marked by simple funerals in frozen ground, prayers whispered softly under a pale sky. When funds run low, hunger gnaws relentlessly, a constant companion to the cold. The scent of smoke mingles with the dust and the faint tongue of coal from passing locomotives. These flames are fragile beacons against the dark and cold. The railroad towns, hubs of activity amid vast emptiness, were home to transient workers, wanderers, and the homeless, whose experiences of winter were often marked by vulnerability, endurance, and a rugged form of community. Imagine a small, bustling town that has sprung up alongside the rails, a place where wooden buildings crowd narrow streets, lanterns flicker in windows, and the clatter of trains punctuates the cold air. The men and women here are often laborers, railroad workers, brought by the promise of steady wages, or those displaced by economic hardship, following the rails in search of opportunity or escape. Their clothing is worn and threadbare, patched repeatedly against the relentless wear of travel and cold. Layers of wool, canvas, and leather provide some protection, but the chill finds its way into bones and breath. Mittens are mended with haste. Boots, stiff with ice and mud, crack underfoot. Shelter is precarious. Some find refuge in crowded boarding houses, where warmth is scarce, and nights are loud with coughs and whispered worries. Food is often scarce and unpredictable. Railroad workers might receive meals provided by company-cooked stews heavy with potatoes. Despite hardship, moments of solidarity and resilience emerge. Groups gather to share stories, to sing songs passed down from distant homes, to dream aloud of better days. Health is a serious concern. Winter storms, with sudden blizzards and fierce winds, heighten the peril. Yet, even in these harsh conditions, there is a fierce determination to endure. The railroad itself, a symbol of connection and movement, also offers a fragile hope. As you imagine this world-cold winds cutting through tents and lean-tos, the soft glow of campfires against night's darkness, the muffled sounds of trains in the distance, feel the weight and resilience of those who live here. Let this quiet reflection settle within you, a gentle reminder of lives lived on the edge, of endurance in the face of cold and uncertainty. Far from the sturdy walls and warm hearths of the wealthier few, there lived another group whose winters were shaped by scarcity, endurance, and quiet determination. These were the poor settlers and migrants, families and individuals drawn westward by dreams of land and opportunity, but often confronted instead with the harshest realities of frontier life. The roof, made from overlapping shingles or even salvaged tin, leaks gently when the thaw begins, allowing drips to fall with a steady rhythm on the earthen floor. The windows, if there are any, are small and shuttered against the wind, sometimes covered with oiled paper to keep out drafts. The chill is sharp and immediate, seeping through worn clothing and thin walls. Woolen garments, knitted mittens, and fur-lined hats are prized possessions, their edges frayed from years of use. The pantry is small and carefully inventoried root vegetables stored in cool cellars, dried beans and cornmeal rationed carefully, salted pork stretched to feed many. Dinner might be a stew of whatever vegetables and meat can be gathered, cooked slowly over the fire to make the most of limited ingredients. Bread, when available, is dense and coarse, often made with minimal yeast or baking powder. The aroma of cooking is muted, but comforting, a reminder of home and survival. Firewood must be gathered or traded, snow cleared to maintain access. Repairing roofs or ceiling gaps in cabins becomes urgent as winter deepens. Illness is common in winter. Coughs, fevers, frostbite can quickly become serious without medical care. Remedies are homegrown, herbal teas, poultices made from plants gathered in warmer months, and prayers whispered in hope. The harsh conditions and limited resources mean that the poor are often most vulnerable to winter's toll. Each task demands energy and determination, made all the more challenging by the cold and fatigue. Hunting and fishing provide occasional supplements, but the deep snow and ice limit these activities. Their play is shaped by winter's limitations, snowballs, and sleds when weather permits, quiet games by the fire when it does not. Education, if it happens, is often informal and interrupted by the demands of survival. Their endurance is quiet, but unyielding, shaped by necessity and hope. They find moments of joy in the laughter of children, the sharing of a simple meal, the glow of a well-tended fire. They celebrate holidays and milestones, creating traditions that bring light to dark days. Wild game is unpredictable, and success can mean the difference between a full belly and an empty one. Layers are essential, for warmth must be coaxed and preserved. Children's coats are sometimes too large or too small, gloves mismatched, boots cracked and soaked through from trudging through snow and slush. Sense the gentle warmth that glows despite scarcity, the steadfastness that carries them through the longest nights. Let this quiet courage settle over you like a soft blanket, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, life finds a way. Buckets are carried carefully through snow, their contents warmed near the fire before use. Washing is minimal, done sparingly to conserve water and fuel, and cleanliness is balanced against practicality. Sewing and mending are constant tasks, done by dim lantern light in the evening after the day's labor is done. Snow drifts reach waist-high, and icy winds bite exposed skin. Paths to neighbors or town are often blocked or treacherous, limiting social contact and trade. The isolation weighs heavily, especially during blizzards when venturing outdoors is dangerous or impossible. Yet neighbors often rely on each other, sharing firewood, food, or news when possible. These small acts of community are lifelines in the vast, cold landscape. Heating the cabin is a daily challenge. Firewood is precious and often scarce, gathered with great effort from nearby woods or traded in town. Every ember must be cherished, every log carefully split and tended. The smoke curls upward in lazy spirals, filling the space with a comforting but pungent scent that clings to clothing and skin. The cabin smells faintly of smoke and damp wood, of worn blankets and the subtle musk of animals sheltering inside. Their homes were simpler, their resources fewer, and their winters longer and colder, yet within their stories lies a profound testament to resilience and hope. Imagine a small cabin, built hastily from rough-hewn logs, its walls thin and gaps imperfectly sealed with mud or moss. Inside, the space is cramped and sparsely furnished. A simple hearth crackles low, struggling to warm the single room that serves as kitchen, living area, and sleeping quarters. The furniture is handmade or scavenged rough tables, chairs with uneven legs, beds fashioned from straw-filled sacks or blankets spread on the floor. Despite these humble surroundings, the cabin is home, a place of safety and refuge from the bitter cold that presses beyond the door. Morning begins early, often before dawn, with the stirring of bodies wrapped in threadbare blankets. Clothing among the poor settlers is often patched and worn, handed down through families or exchanged with neighbors. Food is a daily concern, and winter amplifies its scarcity. Meals are simple and frugal. Porridge made from ground corn or oats, thick and bland, is eaten for breakfast. Water is another precious resource. Wells can freeze over, streams become choked with ice, and fetching water requires layers of effort and courage against the cold. Outside the cabin, the world is both beautiful and unforgiving. Chores continue despite the cold. Feeding animals, if there are any, is a critical task. Even a single chicken or goat requires daily care. Children adapt quickly to this world. They learn early to dress in layers, to navigate icy paths, and to help with chores suited to their size and strength. Health is a constant worry. Yet, despite these hardships, the poor settlers carry a remarkable strength. As you imagine this life, the cold pressing against thin walls, the patched clothing, the modest meals, the tireless work, feel the weight of their resilience. And as your own breath slows, your body relaxes, and your thoughts drift gently, carry with you the spirit of those poor settlers and migrant souls shaped by cold and challenge, warmed by hope and quiet strength. Amid the vast, snow-blanketed expanses of the American frontier, where cold pressed hard against log cabins and sweeping plains alike, there existed a small, distinct circle of people whose winters were marked by a different rhythm, a quiet comfort, and an ease born of wealth and resources. These were the wealthy few, landowners, merchants, town officials, and those who had, through fortune or enterprise, carved out a life buffered against the worst extremes of winter's grasp. The exterior is crafted from hewn stone or carefully milled timber, its walls thick and insulated to keep the cold at bay. Rich rugs soften the floorboards, heavy curtains hang thickly over windows, and walls are adorned with tapestries or paintings that lend a sense of elegance and history. This is a space designed not only for survival, but for comfort and style, a sanctuary from winter's chill where the harshness of the outside world is softened by careful design and abundant resources. Layers of fine wool, velvet, and fur are fashioned into coats, gloves, and hats that protect from the cold while demonstrating status. Furs bear fox, mink trim collars and cuffs, their softness a tactile luxury against skin. Boots are lined with plush leather, polished and shaped to perfection. Inside, lighter garments of silk or cotton are worn beneath the layers, their presence a reminder of the comforts available beyond necessity. The roof slopes steeply, designed to shed heavy snows, its eaves carefully trimmed and gutters cleared regularly to prevent ice dams. The wealthy knew the value of preparation and protection. Firewood was stacked in generous quantities, coal delivered in bulk, and homes fortified against storms with shutters and heavy doors. Doctors might be called upon promptly for illness or injury, medicine stocked and administered with care. Warm clothing and heated rooms reduced the risks of frostbite and illness that plagued less fortunate neighbors. The wealthy could afford to retreat from the harshest conditions, resting and recuperating in comfort. Snow was monitored carefully, and roofs cleared regularly to prevent collapse. Storms could delay travel, disrupt supply lines, and test even the best preparations. But the wealthy few moved through the season with a resilience built on resources, knowledge, and community support. Their winters were quieter, less fraught with peril, yet no less marked by the slow, steady passage of cold days and long nights. Servants labored behind the scenes to maintain the illusion of ease, attending to every detail to keep cold and discomfort at bay. Hear the muted footsteps of servants moving through hallways, the gentle clink of fine china, and the low murmur of voices engaged in calm conversation. Sense the peacefulness that comes from being protected, cared for, and surrounded by abundance. Rooms are heated individually, allowing the family to seek warmth wherever they desire. Baths are taken regularly, a rare luxury on the frontier, with hot water drawn from large basins and scented with herbs or oils. The wealthy few may entertain guests in parlors, glowing with candlelight, where music is played on pianos or violins, and conversations flow freely, a contrast to the silence of isolated cabins. The wealthier few, with their sturdy homes and well-stocked pantries, remind us that even amid harsh seasons, life can be softened by care, preparation, and community. Smoke curls steadily from multiple chimneys, promising warmth throughout the many rooms inside. Paths are cleared by hired hands or mechanical means, allowing for safe travel to nearby town or stables. And shelves lined with imported goods ensure that meals are rich and varied. Balls, dinners, and community gatherings provided opportunities for connection and entertainment within heated halls. These events were carefully planned to avoid the worst weather, but when held, they brought light and warmth to long nights, their elegance a bright contrast to the darkness outside. Kitchens are staffed by cooks skilled in turning these ingredients into feasts that not only nourish, but delight. The aroma of roasted game, fresh-baked pastries, and spiced cider fills the air, a sensory celebration of winter's bounty. Horses are housed in well-insulated barns, their feed plentiful and water warm to prevent freezing. Carriages, sturdy and ornate, stand ready for travel, protected from the elements in covered sheds. For the wealthiest, even sleigh rides through snow-covered forests become an elegant pastime rather than a necessity. To step into their world is to enter a realm of sturdy homes, well-stocked pantries, and warm parlors glowing with lamplight, a stark contrast to the thin walls and sparse provisions of many frontier settlements. Servants, if the family is fortunate enough to employ them, begin the day by stoking fires in multiple rooms, lighting oil lamps, and preparing hot water for baths and washing. The clink of fine china and silverware might be heard in the kitchen as breakfast is laid out, a hearty meal of fresh bread, eggs, cured meats, and steaming coffee, all sourced from stores well stocked before the onset of winter. Imagine, then, the early morning in a grander house nestled on the outskirts of a burgeoning town, a home built not merely for shelter, but for status and endurance. Within, the air is warm and fragrant, the subtle mingling of polished wood, burning coal, and scented oils. The household awakens slowly, not from the urgency of cold, but from the gentle stirring of well-rested bodies. Clothing in this world is both practical and refined. Movement within the home is easy and unhurried. Hallways are spacious, warmed by radiators or large hearths. Outside the home, grounds are maintained with care despite the snow. The pantry and larder reflect abundance. Barrels of salted meats, crates of fresh vegetables preserved in root cellars. Social life among the wealthy often continued unabated through winter. Yet even within this comfort, the presence of winter was undeniable. Health and well-being were also attended to with greater means. In this world, winter was still a formidable presence, a reminder of nature's power and unpredictability. As you imagine this life, Feel the warmth of a crackling fire filling a spacious room, the softness of thick rugs beneath your feet, and the comforting scent of wood smoke mingling with spices from the kitchen. Let this gentle vision of winter's comforts settle within you, a soft contrast to the chill outside. And as your breath slows and your mind quiets, carry with you this glimpse of warmth and ease, a quiet comfort to guide you gently toward rest. In the depths of the long, cold frontier winters, when days were short and nights stretched endlessly beneath frosted skies, life found moments of warmth not only in the flicker of the hearth or the comfort of shared stories, but in the quiet celebrations and feasts that brightened the season. These winter gatherings were more than mere respite from hardship. They were affirmations of hope, community, and the enduring human spirit. Imagine, if you will, the glow of candlelight in a small cabin, the scent of spiced foods mingling with wood smoke. Roasted meats, often turkey or pork, were prized luxuries, their preparation a communal effort. Songs passed down through generations filled the room, their melodies both familiar and comforting. New Year's gatherings were occasions for reflection and renewal, with prayers for health, prosperity, and protection in the coming year. In some communities, Epiphany was observed with the lighting of candles and the blessing of homes. Potluck meals, barn dances, and informal gatherings offered moments of joy and respite. Stories and news were exchanged, friendships deepened, and the weight of winter lightened through companionship. Hear the low murmur of voices, the laughter of children, the soft melodies of a familiar carol. Sense the comfort of shared warmth, the safety of belonging, and the quiet joy that blooms in the heart, even in the coldest times. In these humble assemblies, the human need for connection shone brightest. The winter feasts and holidays of the frontier remind us that even amid snow and ice, the human spirit kindles its own light, steady, enduring, and full of hope. These rituals, though varied in form, shared a common purpose: to bring light into darkness, to foster connection, and to affirm life amid the cold. The act of sharing food was a promise that despite scarcity, there was enough. That together, hardship could be borne. That the cycle of seasons would continue, bringing warmth and growth once more. The table was a place where past and future met, where memory and anticipation mingled with the simple pleasure of a hot meal. Children listened wide-eyed as elders recounted tales of Christmases past, of gifts made by hand, of snowstorms weathered, of hope kindled in the darkest nights. The solstice marked a time of renewal and balance, honored with dances, songs, and rituals that connected people to the earth and to each other. Feasts featuring preserved meats, berries, and roots were shared, their preparation and consumption acts of gratitude and reverence. These gatherings strengthened community bonds and sustained spiritual harmony during the season's challenges. Laughter and song chased away the winter's gloom, binding the community in a shared embrace. Root vegetables, baked and mashed, and breads dense and hearty graced the table. Dried fruits and nuts were enjoyed with gratitude, and sweetened beverages, like wassail, warmed both body and spirit. Each dish carried the flavors of survival and celebration, nourishing both flesh and heart. And the gentle murmur of voices raised in song and laughter. These were the gifts that softened the chill, threading joy and tradition through the fabric of frontier life. As the first snow settled and the harvest season gave way to winter's embrace, settlers prepared for the holidays with a sense of reverence and anticipation. Though their resources were often scarce, the promise of feasting and fellowship offered a beacon in the cold months. Pine boughs, if found in the surrounding woods, were brought inside and hung to fill the air with their fresh, resinous scent. Candles flickered in windows, their soft glow a welcome sight for travelers and a symbol of faith and welcome. Decorations were handmade strands of popcorn and cranberries, paper stars, and simple garlands, each crafted with care and imagination. In these small acts, creativity blossomed amid constraint. Families and neighbors worked together to preserve food, drying fruit, smoking meat, and pickling vegetables, stockpiling sustenance that would sustain them through the harsh days. The preparation itself was a quiet ritual, an act of care that connected past to present and hope to reality. The centerpiece of winter celebrations was often Christmas, a time when even the most modest homes transformed into spaces of light and warmth. The holiday meal, though humble by modern standards, was a feast of meaning and abundance. Around the fire, families gathered to sing carols and share stories, their voices weaving a tapestry of tradition and connection. Beyond Christmas, other winter holidays and traditions marked the season's passage. For Native American tribes of the West, winter was also a season of ceremony and celebration. Even in the isolated cabins and homesteads, neighbors often found ways to come together. Winter feasts also carried layers of symbolism and hope. As you imagine yourself within this warm, softly lit space, feel the gentle glow of firelight on your skin, the rich aroma of spices and roasted meat filling the air. Let these images settle softly around you, a gentle embrace guiding you toward rest. In the long, cold nights of the frontier, when the wind howled through the trees and snow lay thick and silent, many found solace, not just in the warmth of the hearth or the company of family, but in faith, superstition, and the quiet power of prayer. Winter, with its harshness and uncertainty, stirred the spirit in ways both gentle and profound. It invited reflection on mysteries beyond the frozen landscape, on unseen forces shaping life, and on the fragile human desire for protection and hope. The Bible, often passed down through generations, was a treasured possession. Its pages, dog-eared and softened by countless readings, held promises of hope, redemption, and shelter from life's tempests, and the desire to make sense of a world often cruel and unpredictable. Sage was burned to cleanse the air. Rosemary was thought to preserve memories and protect against sickness. Salt, sprinkled across thresholds, served as a barrier to wandering spirits. They provided comfort, a framework within which to understand the unseen, and a ritual rhythm that punctuated the long nights. Winter was both a time of hardship and of profound spiritual significance. Ceremonies were held to honor the spirits of the earth, the animals, and the ancestors, seeking balance and harmony through the cold months. The act of caring for the sick was as much a spiritual service as a practical one, invoking blessings and protection for those weakened by cold and illness. Prayer and song, often performed in groups around fire circles, served not only as worship, but as a means of strengthening community ties and sustaining morale. The silence outside the cabin became a mirror for inner stillness. Contemplation of the stars through frost-rimmed windows inspired awe and humility. The vastness of the frozen landscape invited thoughts of eternity, of cycles beyond human measure, of a world that endures beyond seasons and storms. These small acts of ritual offered a sense of control in an otherwise uncontrollable environment. They were lifelines, delicate yet strong, woven through the days and nights, connecting the physical and the spiritual, the seen and the unseen. Feel the gentle rhythm of voices raised in song or whispered in gratitude. Sense the quiet reverence that fills the space between people and the vast winter world outside. Many settlers carried with them customs from distant homelands, rituals to ward off evil spirits, charms to bring good fortune, gestures meant to protect hearth and home. Snow was not merely frozen water, but a sacred veil, covering and protecting the earth in its quiet slumber. The faith, superstition, and prayer of those who lived in winter as shadow remind us that even in the coldest times, the human spirit seeks connection, comfort, and meaning. The north wind was more than a chill breeze. It was a messenger, a force to be respected and heeded. This spirituality infused every aspect of survival, from hunting and gathering to shelter building and healing. The sudden silence of birds before a snowfall was taken as a signal to prepare and beware. Snowflakes themselves, each unique and intricate, were often viewed as silent messengers, reminding the watcher of the fleeting beauty amid hardship. Scripture was read aloud in the evenings, stories shared not just for instruction, but for the warmth they brought, parables of endurance, of light in darkness, of the steadfastness of the soul. Imagine a modest cabin deep in the wilderness, the firelight flickering softly against rough-hewn walls. Gathered near the hearth are figures bowed in thought or conversation, men and women, old and young, their faces lit by the amber glow, eyes reflecting both weariness and yearning. In this place, faith was woven into the fabric of daily life, offering a steady thread amid the uncertainty of snowdrifts and storms. Mothers would pray over their children before sleep, asking for guardian angels to watch through the long night. Fathers might kneel alone, voices low, entreating strength for the days ahead. The act of prayer created a sacred space, a moment of connection beyond the physical, a balm for fear and fatigue. For many settlers, Christianity provided a comforting framework. Prayer, too, was a refuge. Spoken quietly or silently, it was a means of seeking protection from the biting cold, from illness, from misfortune. But alongside formal faith lived a rich tapestry of superstition, born from a blend of old-world traditions, frontier experience. One common belief held that certain herbs, when hung above doorways or near the fire, could keep away malevolent forces that prowled the dark winter nights. Other superstitions related to animals and natural phenomena. The howl of a lone wolf was sometimes seen as an omen, a warning of danger, or a sign of an approaching storm. These beliefs were not merely fanciful. They were deeply embedded in the rhythm of life, passed from mother to daughter, father to son, woven into the stories told beside the fire. In Native American communities, spiritual connection to the land and its seasons was central. The belief that the natural world was alive with spirits shaped how winter was experienced and endured. Healing practices blended faith and herbal knowledge. Plants gathered before winter were used in teas and poultices. Prayers accompanied their preparation. In the solitude of winter nights, many found strength in meditation and quiet reflection. These spiritual practices and beliefs, though varied in form, shared a common purpose: to nurture hope, to provide comfort, and to affirm life amid the harshness of winter. As you listen, imagine the soft murmur of prayer blending with the crackle of firewood, the scent of burning sage mingling with wood smoke. Let this calm presence settle within you, a gentle warmth against the chill, a steady light guiding you toward rest. In the vast expanses of the American West, scattered among rolling hills, dense forests, and snow-covered plains, lie the silent echoes of lives once lived, the ghost towns. These abandoned settlements stand as quiet monuments to an era shaped by ambition, hardship, and the relentless hand of winter. The air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and aged timber. Buildings lean slightly, their paint faded and peeling. Windows shuttered or broken, their glass frosted with age and cold. Each artifact a rusted horseshoe, a cracked crockery shard, a worn leather boot speaks softly of the lives once lived here, the daily struggles, the moments of joy, the resilience in the face of relentless cold. Buildings constructed hastily in the gold rush boom often lacked insulation, their thin walls offering scant protection against winter's chill. Near a long-abandoned barn, the skeletal frame of a wagon lies tangled in brambles, its iron wheels frozen in place. These silent artifacts capture the weight of survival in a place where every season was a challenge. Yet some structures were built with more care: double walls, window shutters lined with cloth or paper, roofs angled steeply to shed snow. Weathered headstones, their inscriptions worn by wind and snow, hint at the stories of those who braved the frontier as winter, but could not escape its grasp. Through careful excavation and study, we learn not only about the hardships faced, but also about the ingenuity and spirit that once thrived here. Winter was not simply a backdrop, but an active participant, shaping lives, shaping choices, shaping history itself. The echo of footsteps long vanished, the soft sigh of wind through broken windows, the faint warmth still lingering in stone hearths. Let this gentle reflection carry you deeper into the night, your thoughts settling like snowflakes, your breath slowing in time with the silent heartbeat of a past long preserved by winter's hand. Artifacts reveal trade connections stretching across the continent, hints of cultural blending, and stories of community woven tightly, even in the face of winter's isolation. The cold, with its diseases and hardships, claimed many, and their resting places are quiet reminders of mortality amid the wilderness. The remains of chimneys still standing bear witness to countless fires kindled for warmth and cooking, their stonework blackened with soot and time. Sometimes economic tides shifted, and what was once a hopeful boom became a slow fade. The cold preserves these places, freezing moments in time like a photograph slowly fading but never gone. The stillness invites contemplation, a gentle pause to reflect on the passage of time and the endurance of memory. The winter storms, harsh and unyielding, hastened these changes, cutting off trade routes, damaging infrastructure, and making life untenable. In this way, winter shaped the very geography of human settlement. The sound beneath your boots is muted snow muffling every step, the wind whispering through broken eaves and empty doorways. Here, the pulse of life has long since ceased, replaced by the steady rhythm of seasons folding one into another. Their empty streets, crumbling buildings, and rusting tools tell stories not shouted from mountaintops, but whispered in the soft hush of snowfall and the slow passage of time. To walk among these ruins is to step gently into a world paused frozen, not only by the cold, but by history itself. Imagine yourself wandering slowly along a narrow, snow-dusted lane where wooden sidewalks sag beneath the weight of winter's quiet. These ghost towns were once bustling with promise. Settlements founded on the hope of gold, silver, or fertile land. They sprang up rapidly in the mid-19th century, fueled by waves of settlers and fortune-seekers. Saloons rang with laughter and song. General stores brimmed with goods. Schools echoed with the voices of children. But winter, with its long nights and harsh storms, was a patient adversary. Snowdrifts could block roads, freezing out supplies and visitors. Fires threatened to consume wooden structures, and frigid temperatures tested the limits of both people and infrastructure. Archaeologists today uncover the layers beneath these ruins, gently brushing away dust and debris to reveal the stories, encoded in nails, foundations, and forgotten belongings. The architecture of these towns tells much about adaptation and endurance. Walk carefully through the remnants of a homestead, and you may find a cellar dug deep beneath the frozen earth, a place where food was stored through the winter months, shielded from frost and pests. In some ghost towns, cemeteries stand as solemn markers of lives ended too soon. Yet, abandonment was not always a sign of failure. Sometimes towns were moved or absorbed into larger communities. As you imagine this silent world, notice the soft blanket of snow smoothing rough edges, filling gaps and quieting the emptiness. The archaeology of abandonment is a conversation across centuries, a dialogue between past and present. In this quiet exploration, the ghost towns become more than ruins. They become portals to understanding the complex relationship between humans and their environment. As you breathe in the imagined air of these deserted streets, feel the weight and the wonder of these frozen stories. Winter on the frontier was more than a season marked by snow and cold. It was a season alive with stories. As the days shortened and the nights stretched long and silent, families and neighbors gathered close to hearths, flickering with firelight. Inside, the room is warm and dim, the scent of burning pine mingling with the faint musk of animal pelts. The family sits around the hearth, faces illuminated by flickering flames. A grandmother begins a tale, her voice low and steady, like the slow drip of melting icicles, inviting listeners into a world where shadows lengthen and the ordinary becomes strange. These stories remind listeners of the unpredictable power of winter and the need for respect and caution. These creatures become symbols in folklore, embodying traits humans admired or feared, serving as guides or warnings. One such tale warns against wandering too far from the cabin after dark, lest one be caught by the frost wraith, a cold specter said to freeze victims where they stand. Another tells of the Snow Maiden, a beautiful but deadly spirit who lures travelers into blizzards with her haunting song. These stories functioned as guides to safety as much as sources of wonder. These stories provided comfort against loneliness, a sense of control in an unpredictable world, and a means to pass time in the long dark nights. The hush of snow outside deepens, and the stories drift through the room like falling flakes, soft, intricate, and mesmerizing. The world beyond the cabin feels vast and mysterious, but here, in the circle of light and warmth, there is safety, community, and the timeless magic of storytelling. They created connections between generations, binding young and old in shared narrative and cultural identity. The boundaries between animal and spirit world often blurred in these tales, weaving a tapestry of belief where every rustle in the snow had meaning, and of mysterious lights dancing across the northern sky phenomena, now understood as the aurora borealis, but once seen as spirits or omens. These stories fueled the imagination and inspired both hope and caution. They also offer moments of levity amid the cold, as characters outwit or appease these beings through cleverness or ritual. In the dim glow, tales were told, whispered legends, ghostly accounts, and old superstitions that seemed to rise from the very frost that coated the land outside. These stories were not mere entertainment. They were the threads weaving community together, comforting the restless, hanging certain herbs by the door, keeping salt near the hearth, or carrying charms made of bone or stone were common practices. The turning of the year was marked by ceremonies to honor spirits of the land, asking for protection through the cold months and blessings in the coming spring, and making sense of a world where the line between the known and the mysterious often blurred. Imagine a cold evening in a frontier cabin. The wind howls beyond the log walls, snow drifting softly past shuttered windows. One such story speaks of the White Lady, a ghostly figure said to wander the forests and mountain passes, her pale form barely visible through swirling snow. She is both a warning and a comfort, a spirit who appears to travelers lost in blizzards, offering guidance or a gentle reminder of the fragile line between life and death in the cold wilderness. Her story is told with reverence and a hint of fear, a reminder that the land holds secrets beyond the reach of man. Another favorite tale is that of the Iceman, a mysterious figure said to dwell within glaciers and frozen lakes. Legend holds that he can freeze a person with a single touch or thaw the heart of the coldest soul. Children listen wide-eyed as elders recount encounters with this enigmatic being, sometimes seen only as a flash of blue light beneath the ice or as a whisper carried on the winter wind. These stories speak to the awe inspired by the natural world and the mystery wrapped in its frozen beauty. Cabin tales often include mischievous spirits, known as winter tricksters, entities that toy with travelers and settlers, leading them astray on snow-covered trails or causing fires to sputter out in the hearth. Firelight stories frequently turn to animals of the season, the silent owl whose hoot foretells snow, the fox whose cunning outsmarts the cold, the wolf pack whose howls pierce the night and stir both fear and fascination. Winter folklore was also rich with cautionary tale stories, meant to teach respect for the land and its dangers. Beyond ghost stories, there were legends of lost gold and hidden treasure buried beneath the ice, of secret caves warmed by ancient fires. Superstitions also played a role in winter life rituals and beliefs, designed to ward off bad luck or invite good fortune. The telling of winter folklore was itself a form of survival. As you imagine yourself in that cabin, bathed in firelight and the soft murmur of voices, you may feel the flicker of those ancient tales kindling within you. Let these gentle stories settle over you, a quiet melody woven through the night, guiding you toward peaceful rest and dreams carried on winter's whisper. Winter in the vast lands of the American West was not simply a season for the indigenous peoples who lived there. It was a deep living part of their world, a force to be understood, respected, and woven into the very fabric of life. The ground is muffled beneath thick layers of white, and the air is crisp, sharp enough to quicken the breath. Amid the towering pines and rolling hills, the soft sound of footsteps on snow tells of a small group moving deliberately through the landscape. They wear clothing crafted with exquisite care from animal hides and furs, tailored not only for warmth, but for mobility. Snowshoes, intricately laced and shaped like the paws of native animals, spread weight evenly across the snow, allowing travel across deep drifts without sinking. The soft thud of these shoes against the white landscape was a familiar sound, echoing through valleys and forests like a heartbeat. Sleds, sometimes pulled by dogs, carried supplies and children, gliding smoothly over packed snow. Each layer is the product of generations of observation, and skill robes lined with soft rabbit fur, moccasins padded with grass and wrapped in sinew, hoods that shield faces from biting wind. Ceremonies marked the changing seasons, honoring the spirits of the land and the animals that sustained life. Communal meals around the fire were times of connection and gratitude. They learned to read the land, to recognize animal tracks and weather signs, to craft tools and clothing. Education was hands-on, woven through daily tasks and stories told by elders. These lessons were gift keys to thriving in a world where the cold was both adversary and teacher. The warmth of furs against skin, the quiet flicker of lantern light inside a tipi, the steady rhythm of breath mingling with the cold air. This is a story not just of survival, but of belonging, a testament to the profound wisdom of those who lived in close harmony with the harsh winter world. Even in the harshest months, there was celebration of life, of endurance, of the coming spring. Rituals honored the cycles of nature, giving thanks for the animals taken and seeking protection through the long months. Songs and dances, though sometimes restrained by the cold, were expressions of hope and resilience. The quiet power of these traditions sustained communities in ways beyond the physical. Smoked fish, roasted root vegetables, and dried berries formed the center of these gatherings, their flavors mingling with the smoky warmth of the hearth. The northern lights danced faintly across the sky, their ethereal glow a reminder of mystery and beauty beyond human reach. The crunch of snow underfoot, the distant howl of wolves, the soft rustle of pine boughs whispered a timeless song of endurance. Stories told around fires were rich with lessons, tales of cunning foxes, brave warriors, and wise elders. These stories, passed down through generations, were more than entertainment. They were maps for living, guides to understanding the balance between humans and nature. Their resilience was not loud or boastful, but steadfast and sure. In the vast frozen landscape of the West, they found not only ways to endure the cold, but ways to live richly within it. The slightest disturbance in snow patterns revealed the path of an elk or deer. Hunters moved silently, blending with the environment, guided by an intimate understanding of animal behavior. Trapping, spearfishing, and communal hunts were planned with care, balancing the needs of the group with the respect for the land. Long before settlers crossed prairies and mountains, native tribes had learned the language of snow and ice, the rhythms of cold winds and frozen rivers. Women crafted delicate beadwork and quillwork that adorned garments, adding not only beauty, but cultural identity. Every stitch told a story. Every garment carried the touch of those who made it with care. Their survival was not a matter of brute force or desperate struggle alone, but a quiet, profound harmony with the land and its cycles. In some regions, earth lodges were partially dug into the ground, their walls thick with packed soil and insulated with layers of bark and moss. Snow was sometimes piled around these structures, its insulating power harnessed to keep interiors warmer than the frigid air outside. Smoke holes and vents were carefully positioned to allow warmth without suffocating those inside. To imagine their winter lives is to step into a world of intimate knowledge, spiritual balance, and ingenious adaptation. Picture the early morning light filtering through a forest, heavy with snow. The native peoples understood the land not as a wilderness to be conquered, but as a living teacher. Winter was a season of waiting and watching, of preserving strength and renewing bonds. Ice was sometimes cut into blocks and stored near shelters for later use. Food was preserved through drying, smoking, and freezing, each method a testament to the ingenuity born of necessity. Buffalo meat, rich and dense, was dried into jerky, its saltiness a savor against the cold. Fish were caught through holes chipped in frozen lakes, their flesh hung to dry in the crisp air. Tipis were designed with smoke holes and tightly stretched hides to retain warmth and vent smoke, their conical shapes shedding snow like the curved branches of a tree. Inside, mats woven from reeds and animal pelts lined the floors, insulating bodies from the frozen ground. The hearth, small but vital, offered a flicker of firelight and the promise of warmth. Water, essential but often scarce in winter, was carefully gathered from melting snow or from streams beneath ice. The rhythms of daily life were slow and measured. Movement was cautious and purposeful. Spiritual practices and community gatherings imbued winter with meaning beyond mere survival. Clothing itself was a work of art and wisdom. Furs were sewn with sinew, seams overlapped to shed wind, and edges lined with soft fur to prevent snow from entering. The ingenuity of winter shelters extended beyond tipis. Hunting strategies adapted to the season's challenges. Tracking was an art refined to perfection. Food was shared generously among families and clans, strengthening bonds and ensuring survival. Children were taught early the skills of survival and respect. The deep spirituality of winter life was evident in ceremonies that sought balance and harmony. Even in the darkest, coldest nights, the connection to the land remained strong. You may feel yourself drawn into this world, the cool scent of pine and earth, the crackle of firewood, the soft patter of snowshoes on frozen ground. As your breath slows and your thoughts drift gently, like snowflakes settling on silent branches, carry with you the quiet strength of these people. In the quiet snow-laden cabins scattered across the frontier, the winter world was held together, not just by the men who trapped or cleared trails, but by the pioneer women, whose resilience was as steady and enduring as the frost that clung to the window panes. The room is chill, despite the small fire still glowing low in the hearth. She reaches for a woolen shawl, wraps it tightly around her shoulders, and pulls on heavy slippers or boots, thick with homemade linings. The cold is a constant companion, sharp, at first touch but familiar, accepted. Perhaps there are oats, soaked overnight and simmered into a warm porridge. Leftover salted pork or jerky is sliced thin and warmed. There is no room for waste. Each morsel is precious, a small token in the daily battle against hunger and cold. Every movement is deliberate, a slow unfolding of the day's necessary rituals. She tends to children, dressing them in layers of hand-knit sweaters and patched trousers or skirts, wrapping scarves snugly around necks and cheeks. Laundry is a slow and arduous task. Cloths stiff with cold are soaked, scrubbed, wrung by hands numbed by water and chill. Clothes are dried near the fire, hung on lines stretched across the cabin or draped over chairs. Mending is constant, a torn sleeve, a frayed hem, a lost button carefully replaced with scraps of thread. These repairs are acts of preservation, small victories against the wear of winter. Small hands are pulled into woolen mittens, boots fastened tight. Her endurance is quiet but unyielding, a steady flame against the cold. Feel the warmth of the hearth behind her, the softness of the blankets she folds, the steady rhythm of her breath mingling with the fire's glow. Let this vision settle over you, a gentle reminder of the quiet power of care and endurance. She embodies the paradox of survival, strength in gentleness, resilience in routine, hope in hardship. Food is stretched to feed the family through long days and even longer nights. As the fire crackles and the family gathers near the hearth, she often takes up a task of spinning yarn or weaving. The spinning wheel hums softly, a steady, soothing sound that fills the cabin's dim corners. Threads of wool twist and coil, destined to become warm clothing or blankets. Each fiber is a thread of care, connecting past and future, women and children, labor and love. Jars of preserves, berries, jams, pickled vegetables are treasures opened sparingly. The pantry is carefully inventoried, every crumb accounted for. A pioneer woman is both cook and steward, ensuring that her family will not only survive, but find small comforts in the bitter cold. Her eyes watch carefully for signs of frostbite or illness, knowing how easily winter can claim even the youngest. Their lives were woven deeply into the rhythms of the cold, their days shaped by both the harsh demands of survival and the tender tasks that nurtured life amid the relentless winter. Songs rise softly, voices blending with the fire's whisper. Children listen wide-eyed, finding warmth not only in the fire, but in the voices of their mothers, grandmothers, sisters. These stories are lifelines, weaving a tapestry of identity and resilience. Mittens are often lined with scraps of fur or wool, sewn tightly to block the chill. Or she may pause to pray or meditate, seeking strength from faith or the comforting rituals passed down through generations. The long nights invite reflection, the weight of isolation softened by memories and hopes. Snow blankets the fields and forests, muffling sound and reshaping familiar paths. The woman steps carefully, balancing on icy ground, her breath rising in soft clouds. Casks await feeding the animals, chopping wood, tending the garden beds covered now in frozen earth. Each chore demands effort and patience, often done alone or alongside other women who have become extended family in this frontier life. A bonnet or cap is pulled low to shield her face from wind and snow. In this, as in so much, survival is a quiet mastery of detail. Imagine the soft light of dawn filtering through frost-rimmed windows, catching in the strands of a woman's hair as she rises, quietly as possible, so as not to disturb sleeping children or a weary husband. The first act is to stoke the fire gently, carefully. The barn, rough-hewn and drafty, shelters cows, horses, and chickens, each dependent on the careful hands of the women who bring hay, grain, and water. Buckets are heavy with ice-cold water, fetched and carried indoors to thaw and warm. The sounds of animals' low moos, soft clucks, the snuffling of horses, are a reminder that life continues despite the cold's unyielding grip. Flames must be coaxed back from the embers, lest the chill of the night take hold again. She moves close, feeling the heat rise, warming stiff fingers and toes. The scent of smoke mingles with the faint, comforting aroma of dried herbs hanging from the rafter sage. Mint, lavender, a small garden of scents, preserved through the frost. The cabin, still quiet except for the crackling fire, feels like a fragile sanctuary against the white wilderness beyond. In the kitchen corner, the water is drawn from a bucket that had been brought inside the night before a few pails of melted snow warmed slowly over the stove. There is always careful calculation in the use of water. It must be rationed, for fetching it from outside means facing the cold anew. The woman lifts a kettle, its metal surface cold to the touch, and sets it over the flames, watching as the water slowly heats. This moment, simple and unremarkable in warmer places, carries weight here. It is the beginning of countless tasks that will fill the day. Breakfast preparation is modest but purposeful. If there is flour left, bread may be baked, dense and hearty, to be broken by hand and shared with family. As the family stirs to life, the pioneer woman moves among them with practiced grace. Her own clothing is layered homespun undergarments, heavy skirts, thick woolen bodices, and sturdy boots. Every stitch and seam speaks of labor and care. Outside the cabin, the winter world stretches vast and silent. Feeding the animals is a daily ritual. Inside, the pioneer woman's work continues. Cooking fills the kitchen with warmth and the faint, inviting scents of herbs, stewed meat, and bread baking. Evenings are a time of both rest and quiet work. Storytelling is another cherished evening ritual. Around the fire's glow, tales are told of homelands left behind, of journeys taken, of hopes for the future. In moments of quiet, the pioneer woman may write letters, if paper and ink are available, pouring thoughts and news to loved ones far away. Through all these acts, both seen and unseen, the pioneer woman sustains life amid winter's harshness. As you listen now, imagine her cloaked in layers of wool and fur, hands calloused but gentle, eyes bright despite fatigue, moving through the winter landscape with purpose and grace. And as your own breath slows, your body softens, and your thoughts drift, carry with you the strength of those pioneer women who faced winter's cold with unwavering hearts and steady hands. The story of the Donner Party is one that echoes softly through the winter wilderness of the American West, a story of hope turned to hardship, of journeys undertaken with dreams in their eyes and cold settling in their bones. It is a tale that has long been told, whispered around campfires and in quiet rooms, but tonight, as you listen here, it will unfold not as a dramatic saga, but as a gentle reflection on the resilience and fragility of those who faced a winter as cruel embrace. Yet the party pressed on, driven by dreams of fertile valleys and open skies. They heard of a shortcut and untested path called the Hastings Cutoff that promised to shave weeks off their journey. The decision to take this route was not made lightly, but the promise of swifter passage was alluring. And so, with cautious optimism, the Donner Party turned from the well-trodden trails and ventured into the unknown. Snow piled thickly, cutting off escape routes and freezing supplies. The wagons, once symbols of progress and possibility, became barriers and burdens, their wheels trapped in icy mud or buried beneath drifts. Others, driven by desperation, ventured out into the snow-covered wilderness in search of help, their figures swallowed by white and silence. The boundary between survival and surrender blurred with each passing day. Food grew scarce. The animals, too weak or lost, disappeared one by one. The cold that makes even movement slow and deliberate, each step a careful negotiation with slippery ice or deep drifts. Hands rough and chapped, working tirelessly to mend torn clothing, to clear snow, to prepare what little food remained. The quiet conversations spoken in hushed tones, voices carrying stories of home, of better days, of dreams still held close despite the icy grip of reality. Their story is a reminder of the thin line between hope and despair, of the quiet strength found in solidarity, and of the enduring human will to survive against the odds. The smell of wood smoke mingling with the crisp scent of pine needles and frozen earth. Yet inside, the fires burned steady, a fragile pulse of life against the vast silence. Families gathered close, sharing warmth in stories, seeking comfort in each other's presence. The rhythm of life slowed to match the pace of the cold, each moment stretched and savored, each breath a testament to resilience. The taste of meager meals, dried meat softened over embers, water drawn from melting snow, the bittersweet warmth of tea brewed from pine needles or roots. Hunger gnawed incessantly, an ache that could not be quieted. But here, in this telling, we focus on the stillness beneath the sorrow, the silence of snow falling softly on frozen ground, the soft glow of candlelight flickering against the walls of makeshift shelters, the steady breath of those who refused to give in, who found strength in the face of overwhelming cold. Let this quiet remembrance settle over you, easing your thoughts, slowing your breath, and carrying you gently toward rest. Yet amidst the despair, there were moments of quiet courage, a shared crust of bread, a whispered prayer, a hand held in the dark. These small acts of kindness became lifelines, fragile threads weaving the fabric of community even in the direst circumstances. Imagine a group of pioneers, men, women, and children setting out in the spring of 1846, their wagons laden with supplies, their hearts full of promise and determination. The air inside was thick with smoke and despair, punctuated only by the soft murmur of voices and the faint crackle of embers. Children cried quietly. Mothers soothed them with trembling hands. Men worked tirelessly to clear paths through snow, to hunt or gather what little the land offered. Every day was a test of endurance, every night a challenge to hold hope. They traveled westward, seeking new lives and fertile lands beyond the horizon. The road was long, the terrain often unforgiving, but the warmth of hope kept them moving, mile by mile, under skies both bright and stormy. As summer passed, the travelers encountered hardships familiar to many on the frontier: broken wagon wheels, illness, the slow exhaustion of resources. The Hastings cutoff led them through rugged mountain deserts and rocky passes, landscapes both breathtaking and perilous. Days passed under a relentless sun, the wagons inching slowly across dry, harsh soil. Water was scarce, and the animals, horses and oxen, grew weary. The trail was difficult, sometimes dangerous, and progress was slower than hoped. What had once been dry plains became slick with ice and snowdrifts. The air grew sharp and cold, stinging exposed skin and turning breath to mist. The travelers found themselves trapped in the Sierra Nevada, a wilderness of towering peaks and dense forests, where the sun seemed reluctant to shine and the nights stretched long and dark. Yet the party continued, their spirits buoyed by the thought of reaching California before winter's grip. But the mountains had their own plans. As autumn deepened, the first snows began to fall. The party made camp near what is now called Donner Lake, a place of stark beauty, but also of isolation. Within the cabin and tents, families huddled close to fires, faces pale and drawn from cold and hunger. Disease swept silently through the group: fevers, frostbite, exhaustion. Some grew too weak to rise. The cold was relentless, an unyielding presence pressing in from all sides. It seeped into bones and spirits alike, turning limbs numb and minds weary. The story of the Donner Party is often remembered for its tragedy, the lives lost, the choices made in desperation, the haunting echoes of a winter that tested human limits. In imagining their days, picture the muted colors of the landscape, whites and grays blending into shadows of pine and stone. Picture, too, the faces of those who endured, lines etched by worry and cold, eyes dimmed by fatigue, yet still reflecting the flicker of hope. The nights were long and often haunted by the howl of wind through the trees, the creak of frozen branches, the distant crack of ice shifting beneath the weight of snow. In this winter refuge, surrounded by snow and sky, the Donner Party faced the harshest test of all, a test not only of body, but of spirit. And as you listen now, wrapped in your own warmth and safety, imagine the soft hush of snow falling outside a small cabin, the flicker of firelight on warm faces, and the slow, steady heartbeat of those who weathered the cold with nothing but determination and each other. Far from the clustered cabins and flickering hearths of pioneer settlements, deep within the rugged embrace of the Rocky Mountains and the sprawling forests of the West, lived a different kind of winter survivor. These were the mountain men's solitary figures, carved from the very wilderness they roamed. Men who knew the cold not as a visitor, but as an ever-present companion. Winter was the time of hardship, but also of bounty, a paradox they accepted with quiet resolve. When the rivers froze and the plains were white as bone, they moved with deliberate care, their bodies draped in furs thick enough to hold the chill at bay, their eyes sharp beneath weathered brows. These men were less bound by society's rules and more by nature's unyielding laws. Without it, the cold would seep into bones and spirit alike. Water is scarce but precious, drawn from a melting snowbank or chipped ice, heated slowly in a blackened kettle. Breakfast might be simple, a morsel of dried meat softened in broth, hard bread softened with grease, or whatever last stores remain from fall's harvest. There is no excess here, no luxury. Every calorie is earned through effort. The fire is a ritual, a fragile heart beating against the night's cold. Food is prepared with care, the warmth of broth and meat flowing slowly into tired muscles. He sharpens his tools by flickering lamplight, mends his clothing, and writes sparse notes or maps if he is literate. The slow crunch of snow underfoot, the careful placing of snowshoes, the muffled swish of fur against fabric, the faint glow of a fire flickering through a snowbank, a small beacon of life in a vast white world. Not with fanfare or applause, but with steady breath, careful step, and an intimate dance with the cold that shaped their world. And perhaps you sense, too, the resilience born of such isolation, the quiet strength needed to face the long, relentless winter day after day. His world is small, but vast, defined by the trees, the hills, the rivers, and the endless white that stretches beyond. But inside, there is warmth, not only from fire, but from survival itself. The knowledge that he has met the day's challenges, and will meet the next. The understanding that life, even in the harshest winter, continues. Solitude is a companion, sometimes welcome, sometimes a heavy weight. He knows the silence of the wilderness as deeply as he knows the crackling fire. To imagine them is to picture shadows slipping through snow-draped trees, the faint crunch of footsteps softened by frost, and the sharp, clear air tasting of pine and distant stone. He learns from the animals, their paths, their habits, their adaptations. He watches the sky for signs of weather, the shifting clouds, and the shape of the moon. He knows the snow's texture, how it changes from powder to crust, where it hides dangers like frozen creeks or sudden drops. Each day is a negotiation, a conversation with nature itself. Survival is not guaranteed, but earned through respect and care. The landscape stretches vast and silent, white and unyielding. The mountain man sees it in the way sunlight sparkles like diamonds on the snow surface at dawn, in the patterns of frost that lace the window panes, in the soft cry of an owl against the darkening sky, in the quiet moments by the fire when the world outside is frozen still, and the only sound is the steady rhythm of his own breath and heartbeat. Trees bow heavy with snow, their limbs creaking softly. Lips crack and bleed, fingers stiffen, eyes water from the wind's sharp edge. Yet there is no complaint. The mountain man accepts the cold as part of his existence, a constant challenge met with quiet dignity. He moves slowly, conserving energy, avoiding sudden exertion that might bring sweat and then chill. His breath is measured, visible in the frosty air, mingling with the faint scent of pine and the earthy aroma of frozen soil beneath the snow. The sun, low on the horizon, glints off icy crusts and frozen streams. Tracks, those of deer, elk, wolves, puncture the snow's surface, telling stories only the experienced eye can read. He follows these signs, moving with the stealth and patience of a shadow, his senses attuned to every sound, every shift in the wind. These were not men bound by walls or warmth, but by will and wilderness. He carries tools, knives sharpened on stones, small axes and flint, each one vital. The cold makes hands clumsy and numb, but experience guides each movement. He knows how to build a snow shelter quickly if the storm catches him unawares, a simple dome carved from packed snow or a shallow cave beneath a fallen tree. These shelters are cold and damp, but life-saving. The mountain men were trappers and hunters, their lives woven tightly with the seasons and the rhythms of the land. Imagine a man rising before dawn, the sky a slate gray, the world hushed beneath a blanket of freshly fallen snow. His cabin might be no more than a lean-to, logs stacked with rough precision, roofed with bark. A coonskin cap or a hood fashioned from wolf's pelt covers his head, ears shielded from the biting wind. Around his neck hangs a scarf of woven wool, frayed at the edges but indispensable. His hands, wrapped in mittens made from the softest hides, know both the tenderness of a newborn fawn and the hardness of a flint struck for fire. And branches, its hearth little more than a stone ring where firewood smokes and glows faintly. Inside, the air is still, heavy with the scent of damp fir and wood smoke, his breath a thin cloud in the freezing space. The mountain man dresses slowly, each layer chosen for function over comfort skins of beaver, elk, and buffalo, tanned and softened over months of labor, stitched with sinew by calloused hands. These pelts form a patchwork armor against the cold, each one telling its own story of trap, chase, and survival. His boots, crafted from rawhide and lined with fur, are stiff and cracked, but warm enough to carry him across frozen creeks and icy slopes. The mountain man's day begins with fire, a fragile light coaxed from embers, dry twigs, and patience. Once prepared, the mountain man steps outside, his breath curling into the frozen air like smoke. Trapping in winter is both art and necessity. The mountain man sets his snares with precision, placing them where the game must pass, hidden beneath snowdrifts or frozen branches. The trapper's coat is his fortress, but the cold still gnaws at exposed skin. Evenings find him returning to his shelter or cabin, often alone. The mountain man's life is a study in patience and observation. Despite the hardships, there is beauty. You may feel your own breath deepen as you imagine this solitary figure moving through the cold, the sharp scent of pine and wood smoke filling your mind. As the mountain man settles in for the night, wrapping himself in layered furs, the cold still presses against the thin walls of his shelter. And so, in this quiet, solitary way, the mountain men endured. As daylight wanes and the sun's pale light slips behind the distant ridges and snow-covered plains, a profound shift occurs in the frontier cabin. The day's work, measured and steady, gives way to the evening's slower, more intimate rhythms. Outside, the wind gathers strength, sweeping across the landscape with an unrelenting whisper, promising night and cold that will settle like a heavy cloak. Children curl beside their mothers or fathers, small bodies nestling into laps, their breath visible in the chilly air, but their faces softened by the fire's glow. The stew is thick and hearty root vegetables, salted pork or jerky softened from the smokehouse, a handful of dried beans rehydrated and simmered until tender. The walls of the cabin, rough logs, scarred by seasons of weather, seem to close in, enfolding those inside in a protective embrace. The outside world is vast, silent, and cold, but here, in this humble space, there is a fragile sanctuary. The heat from the fire warms more than skin. It warms the spirit. Sometimes bundles of herbs hang from the rafter: sage, lavender, mint releasing their subtle fragrance when warmed by the fire. These scents mingle with the ever-present aroma of wood smoke, creating a sensory tapestry that is both grounding and soothing. It is a scent that speaks of home, of hearth, of protection against the harsh wilderness beyond. It draws out stories whispered through generations, tales of summer bounty, of lost loved ones, of dreams yet to be realized. Their light is soft and yellow, casting gentle pools of illumination that invite eyes to rest. Hands are clasped, fingers intertwined. A child's head rests on a parent's shoulder. Blankets are spread anew, quilts folded with care. The hearth's embers glow softly, promising warmth in the coldest hours. The family settles into their places, bodies curled against each other, finding comfort in proximity and the steady heartbeat of the fire. Eyes meet across the room, sharing an unspoken understanding of hardship and hope. The day's worries momentarily dissolve in the flicker of flames and the soft, even breathing of those around the hearth. Books are rare, but sometimes a well-worn Bible or a tattered collection of poems lies on a shelf, its pages thumbed and treasured. Paper is precious, and reading is often a communal act, words spoken aloud, a shared experience before sleep. The gentle rhythm of the cabin's evening wraps around you like a familiar blanket. The stories, the songs, the quiet work may become a lullaby, a soft invitation to rest. Stories that might otherwise freeze on the lips like breath on a window pane. A simple song sung by a mother to her children, voice low and steady, becomes a balm against loneliness and fear. These melodies do not seek to entertain, but to soothe, to connect, to remind those gathered that they are not alone. The warmth of song threads through the cabin like the firelight itself. The scent is comforting, earthy, and smoky, promising sustenance more than indulgence. The rhythm of the day's end is slow, unhurried, marked by small acts closing shutters against the night, placing boots near the fire to thaw, folding blankets carefully. The cabin becomes a cocoon, sheltering bodies weary from cold and labor. The warmth is not merely physical, but emotional, born of proximity and shared endurance. Sometimes there is bread, dense and dark, broken carefully by hand and used to soak up every drop of broth. But inside, the fire burns steadily, a sentinel against the night's cold. The contrast is sharp, the wilderness vast and unforgiving, the home small but resolute. Here, life is protected, held close, cherished in the face of relentless winter. Sometimes there are dried fruits or a pinch of sugar, saved for special occasions. Meals are eaten slowly, deliberately, not out of ceremony, but necessity. Each bite carries the weight of a day's labor and the hope of a night survived. The room hums with a low murmur of voices, muted laughter, the shuffle of woolen blankets, the occasional clink of tin cups, or the scrape of a spoon against an earthenware bowl. Conversation is sparse, but meaningful, a gentle weaving of stories, plans, and memories shared across the small circle of warmth. Their eyes wide in the firelight, reflecting sparks like tiny stars. They hear of mountain men who hunted beyond the tree line, of native guides who read the land like a book, of harsh winters past where entire herds were lost, and still the people endured. There is no rush, no urgency to these tales. They unfold slowly, like the snowflakes drifting beyond the cabin walls, each word a quiet snowflake settling on the memory. And in this gentle telling, history is kept alive, not as grand events or dramatic battles, but as the lived experience of those who faced cold and hardship and found ways to carry on. Inside, however, a different kind of warmth begins to glow, soft, steady, and enduring. Mending clothes by lantern light, stitching torn mittens with thread made from scraps, preparing supplies for the next day, sorting wood, filling buckets with water, checking traps, or setting aside dried meat. Each task done with patience and care, a slow choreography against the backdrop of the fire's glow. The needle passes through fabric with a rhythm almost like a lullaby. The cloth softens under practiced fingers. There is comfort in the repetition, in the knowledge that these small acts preserve life itself. It radiates not only from the hearth, but from the shared presence of those who have gathered here through the long winter day. Evenings by the hearth were not simply about heat or light. They were the pulse of survival itself, the quiet heartbeat of a family tethered to each other against the endless cold. Imagine yourself stepping through the cabin's heavy wooden door, the air outside crisp and biting, the crunch of snow beneath your boots fading behind you. A rush of warmer air greets you, thick with the scent of burning wood, dried herbs, and the faint aroma of stew simmering low in a blackened pot. The fire, coaxed back to life earlier in the day, now burns steadily, its amber glow reaching across the walls, casting dancing shadows that ripple gently like a slow-moving tide. The logs snap and settle with a quiet rhythm, each pop a whispered promise of warmth. The hearth is the heart of the home, a place of light in the darkness, refuge from the unyielding cold that presses at every shuttered window. Around the hearth, the family gathers. Some take their places on rough-hewn wooden benches, Others settle on woven rugs or thick quilts spread across the floor. The evening meal is often the richest of the day, but richness here is relative. As you watch, the shadows stretch longer, the firelight deepening the textures of worn faces and calloused hands. The children listen. Beyond stories, there is the work that continues even in the quiet hours. The cabin smells of smoke, damp wool, and the faint hint of pine needles tucked behind the door to keep the chill out. Candles flicker on the windowsill, their flames dancing in the draft, but never extinguished. Music is sparse, but cherished. A violin might be played by a traveling settler, its notes trembling like bird calls in the cold air. As the evening deepens, silence grows more frequent. Conversations fade into thoughtful pauses. Eyes grow heavy. Outside, the wind may rise again, rattling loose the frozen snow from the eaves, sending gusts that moan through the cracks and crevices of the cabin's wooden frame. In these quiet hours, there is a profound intimacy that transcends spoken words. Sleep beckons gently, but is not yet demanded. The long hours of darkness ahead are both a challenge and a gift, a time for rest and restoration. And as you lie there, imagining this scene, the glowing hearth, the softened voices, the scent of smoke and herbs, you may find your own breath slowing, your thoughts quieting. Outside, the world remains vast and cold, but inside, here and now, there is warmth, there is life, there is peace. Cold on the frontier was not a visitor, it was a resident. It came early and stayed late, threading itself into every corner of life, every crack in a wall, every breath drawn before dawn. And because it was always there, always waiting, just beyond the warmth of the hearth, people did not fight it, they dressed for it, not in defiance, not in fashion, but in surrender. Cowboys, trappers, and settlers alike favored long dusters treated with linseed oil to resist snow and wind. Wide-brimmed felt hats were popular, but in winter they were often swapped for coonskin caps, woolen hoods, or knitted coverings that could be pulled down over the ears and neck. Some women wrapped scarves over bonnets, then pulled shawls over those. The effect was less a look and more a strategy. In small towns, neighbors took turns clearing trails between cabins, to the church, to the well. Axes and shovels became as common as cups and spoons. And always, people moved slowly, carefully. A fall on ice could mean a broken leg, and a broken leg could mean death. There were no hospitals, no ambulances. Every trip outside was a risk. Identity was hidden beneath necessity. Faces peeked out from folds of wool and fur, lips chapped and noses red, but eyes clear and watchful. And within each fold, each seam, there was care, the crunch of leather on snow, the distant creak of a frozen fence post as someone passes by, layered in wool and purpose. They are not in a hurry, pulled on thick socks, laced heavy boots, wrapped scarves around a face already pink with cold, and stepped into a world not made for ease, but made endurable by love and layers and the slow wisdom of preparation. Winter does not allow for haste, but they are prepared. They are dressed not for beauty, but for survival, for movement through a world that resists it. And in that movement, in each careful step and each secured button, they continue the oldest story we know, that of adaptation, of enduring, of living. There was planning. A mother wrapping her child's scarf tighter before they stepped outside. A father checking the stitching on his son's mitten. A daughter retying her grandmother's bonnet beneath her chin. These were not dramatic acts, but they were loving ones, quiet, repeated, remembered. Toddlers were wrapped in layers and carried on backs. Older ones wore hand-me-downs stitched from worn-out blankets. They learned to fall softly, to laugh in the snow, but also to listen to it, to read it, the crunch of ice, the hiss of falling flakes. Coats turned into extra blankets, shawls wrapped around toes. Socks were warmed on the stove, then tucked into beds like offerings. Children wore their outer layers to sleep, waking already dressed for the next day's cold. It was efficient. It was necessary, and no one complained. Complaining was reserved for those with choices. The ominous silence before a blizzard. They knew the signs. They had to. They had done this before. They would do it again tomorrow. Boots were set near the fire, not too close leather cracked if scorched. Mittens laid out on the stove's edge, fingers stiff and dark. Every item of clothing was precious. But in winter, clothing was part of the body. An extension, removed only when absolutely safe, and even then, never far from reach. It carried the scent of smoke, the weight of snow, the faint aroma of the animals it had passed. It told the story of each day, not in words, but in wear. Losing a mitten in a snowbank was not a minor inconvenience. It was a loss, one that could not be easily replaced. Sewing kits were always near. A torn seam was repaired by lantern light, by hands raw from cold, using thread made from homespun or Salish cloth. Every repair was a quiet victory. Every intact button, a blessing. Others layered sheepskin coats with rawhide or wool, sometimes wrapping blankets around their shoulders before belting them at the waist with leather. And so boots were thick, often made of leather lined with sheepskin, or in the case of trappers and mountain men, wrapped in layers of hide and tied with sinew or leather cord. Grease was rubbed into them to repel moisture. Newspaper, if one had it, was stuffed inside for insulation. Soles were reinforced with metal or wood to withstand the ice. And yet no boot was perfect. Snow crept in. Ice found seams. And so feet were kept moving. Always moving. A man might step outside looking more like a bundle of cloth than a figure. On the frontier, to move was to warm. There was no idle stroll in January. Every step was deliberate, weighted, careful. Snowshoes were used when the drifts grew two deep, wide wooden frames laced with rawhide, strapped to the feet like woven wings. They allowed a man to cross deep powder without sinking, spreading his weight across the surface. Native tribes had perfected these designs long before settlers arrived, and many learned from them, copying not only the form, but the wisdom behind it. Without snowshoes, a man could tire in minutes, fighting for every foot of ground. With them, he could glide, but it worked. Layer upon layer, each trapping the body's warmth, each a silent defense against the cold that sought every opening, in accommodation. Clothing in the brutal winter of the American West was not a matter of preference. It was a survival strategy. A kind of slow-moving armor, stitched by hand, traded for, patched and repatched, passed down from older siblings, from neighbors, from memory. And so before stepping outside to feed the animals or gather wood before facing the biting wind or crossing a frozen river, there was a quiet, ritual, a layering, a wrapping, a preparation, not just of the body, but of the spirit. Start first at the base. Against the skin, warmth began not with heavy coats, but with the thinnest barrier undergarments made of wool. Often itchy, always necessary. Long johns were a blessing, though not always available. Over that, vests or bodices, then sweaters, if available. Wool was king. It repelled moisture, retained heat, and was readily available if a family kept sheep. In some cabins, spinning wheels turned through autumn and early winter, preparing yarn not for decoration, but for survival. Socks, too, were precious. Dry feet were a luxury. Toes lost to frostbite were not uncommon. And so, socks were often doubled, tripled, stuffed with dry hay in desperation. Mittens, knit thick, and often lined with scraps of fur, were worn even indoors on the coldest days. They were knitted or sewn from flannel or rough cotton, often made at home, and their seams told stories. Some were mismatched, one leg longer than the other. Some were darned in more places than they were whole. But still, They were pulled on each morning with care, because even the smallest layer could mean the difference between a day endured and a day suffered. Over that came trousers sturdy, patched, made from canvas or homespun wool, and thick skirts for women, sometimes several at once. These were not meant to sway or flutter. They were meant to trap heat, to hold the body like a shield. Shirts were heavier in winter. Linsey woolsey, an old colonial blend of linen, and wool was common, scratchy but warm. Outerwear was its own category, a world of coats and cloaks, buffalo robes and bear hides, oilskin wraps, and reworked Union Army greatcoats left over from the war. Then came the head. Heat, as the old wisdom said, escaped most quickly through the top. And so, hats were more than accessories. Boots were the final piece and the most critical. Feet that stayed wet, that stayed cold, did not last long. Movement itself became its own form of heat. But even snowshoes had their limits. In icy terrain, spikes or crampons were added. Paths were packed down by repeated use. And so, the body moved with the land, leaning into wind, stepping wide in drifts, using sticks for balance. Children learned young. Inside the home, movement remained measured. Heavy coats were removed at the door, hung on wooden pegs or draped over chairs to dry. At night, the same clothing often became bedding. In spring, when the snow began to melt and the ice pulled back from the rivers, clothing was washed more thoroughly, mended more fully. To see a family in full winter dress was to see a kind of moving sculpture shapes, wrapped in texture, color dulled by function, identity blurred but protected. Even now, if you listen closely, you might hear it, the faint swish of fabric against fabric. And as you lie there now, beneath your own layers of blankets, of warmth, of silence, you might feel a strange comfort in knowing that elsewhere, long ago, someone rose just like you. By the time the morning light has settled, muted and thick behind snow-laden clouds, the small cabin is fully awake. Not noisy, no. The hush of winter still lingers like a polite guest, dampening even the clatter of tin cups and the scrape of a wooden spoon. The nearest door might be 2 days' ride away, or not reachable at all until the roads thawed. And so, the pantry, if one could even call it, that was a season-long act of hope. They sat close to the fire, mittens off, hands cupped around the bowls like prayer. A luxury, really. A glimpse of spring in the brittle heart of winter. More often, eggs were saved for baking, for trading, or for the ill. And baking, though rare, was a ritual. A single loaf of bread, dense and dark, was an offering of time and warmth and flour, kneaded with cold hands and baked near the fire. The air outside is colder than inside, but somehow less biting now that the body is moving. Smoke rises from the chimney in a steady thread. The door creaks shut behind, and the walk to the barn begins. Hay is lifted from stacks overhead, cut in the fall, dried in the sun, and stored with as much care as gold. Sometimes a horse's warm flank is leaned against for a moment, a brief exchange of heat, not as pets, but as partners. They labor for the family, and in return they are kept alive. And that bond, silent, mutual, unwavering, is one of the oldest in human history. The warmth inside has grown. Dishes are washed with hot water and a scrap of cloth. The pot is scraped clean. Leftovers, if there are any, are wrapped in cloth and placed near the fire to keep from freezing. And then the day's true work begins. But not yet. For now, the bellies are full. The fire is steady. And outside, the animals chew quietly in the snow-softened hush. Sometimes, a calf is checked for signs of illness, its breath examined for irregularity. Life and death ride close together in the barn. Of showing up, day after day, in a world that would rather you didn't. And somehow, in that repetition, in that softness of care, life continues. Not in grandeur, but in grace. A quiet moment before stepping back into the cold, back toward the cabin. The snow falls again soft, almost imperceptibly, and the landscape remains unchanged. Still white, still vast, still utterly indifferent. But the family is warm again. Inside their bodies, inside their home. A single day without food, a night too cold, and the balance tips. Forkfuls are tossed into troughs. Grain, if there is any, is rationed in scoops. Water, the hardest task, is chipped from frozen barrels or carried in from the house, sloshing in metal pails that burn the hands with cold. The chickens receive scraps, vegetable peels, crumbs, yesterday's crusts. They pick and peck and flap their wings, a small chaos in the stillness. It is not far, just a few dozen paces, but the snow makes it feel longer. Drifts reach to the knees. The wind snakes down the collar despite scarves. Fingers ache through gloves. But then comes the scent, faint and familiar, of hay and dung and animal musk. A strange comfort, but comfort all the same. When bread was made, the smell filled the cabin like a benediction. Rich, yeasty, almost holy. A shoulder is pressed against the frame. A boot kicks softly at the bottom corner. Then, with a reluctant moan, it gives. Inside, the animals stir. Not with joy, they do not wag tails or whinny with delight, but with expectancy. They know this rhythm. A cow shifts her weight, the sound of hooves on frozen earth. Chickens cluck softly in the gloom. A horse shakes its mane, steam rising from its nostrils. They have survived another night, and now they wait. The eldest, often tasked with responsibility beyond their years, might help feed the younger ones, blowing on a spoon, wiping a mouth, urging them to chew slowly. Cold itself was the refrigerator. Barrels or crates outside, packed with snow, held venison or fish from the fall. If predators didn't find it, and that was a big if, it might last into February. But even these stores had to be used carefully. Meat was cut thin, dried or salted when possible, sometimes boiled until it was soft enough to chew with tired jaws. A broth might be made from bones, simmered for hours, seasoned only with salt or, if the summer garden had been generous, a bit of dried thyme. There was comfort in the warmth, not necessarily in the taste. And comfort, in winter, was a kind of wealth. The adults ate next, usually in silence, their minds already turning to the day's work, to the dwindling stack of firewood, or the frozen latch on the barn door. The animals, too, wait in the cold, and their survival is often more fragile, more exposed. Livestock did not have hearths. Their shelters, built from planks and packed with straw, offered little protection from the cruelest storms. Yet they were essential: chickens for eggs, cows for milk, oxen for plowing come spring, horses for travel, pigs for the long game of meat. And so, bundled tightly, the family members pull on their coats once more and step out into the pale light. A second helping, if it happened, was rare and always offered to someone else first. It was an act of care to eat less, an act of survival to eat just enough. Root vegetables stored in cellars, jars of pickled beans and cabbage, salt pork hung from rafters, flour in canvas sacks, if one was lucky, sometimes riddled with weevils that had to be sifted out, cornmeal, molasses, dried apples, their edges curling in the cold like parchment. All of it used with a careful hand, measured in spoons instead of scoops. There were no second helpings unless someone had quietly gone without. Every bite was budgeted like currency. Because out here, in the white stillness of winter, food meant fire inside the body, and fire meant life. But awake, in the quiet way of the frontier, the fire burns more steadily now, fed with thicker logs that will hold a heat for longer. Around the hearth, the air is noticeably warmer, enough for steam to curl from a kettle, for cheeks to flush with the heat, for gloves to be removed and set aside on a chair back to dry. And with the fire established, the next need calls softly but firmly: food. Hunger was not dramatic on the frontier. It was constant. a low thrum in the body, a quiet, loyal shadow that arrived each morning and stayed until sleep. Every day, it needed answering. Feeding a family in winter was not a matter of preference. It was a matter of planning, resourcefulness, and patience. Breakfast, if it could be called that, often took the form of a thick porridge oats if available, or cornmeal mush if oats had run out. A dollop of lard might be stirred in, or a trickle of syrup if there was any to spare. For some families, there might be dried berries thrown into the pot, shriveled, dark, and full of flavor. The cooking pot was never truly clean. Not in the modern sense. It was used again and again, the fire slowly darkening its bottom until it was as black as coal, the flavor of months embedded in its walls. And that was not a flaw, it was part of the meal. Flavors were layered not only by ingredients, but by time. A trace of smoked pork from last week. A hint of onions harvested last fall. Even the wood smoke that curled through the cracks in the cabin door found its way into every bite. The children, if there were any, ate first spoonfuls passed carefully from the pot into small bowls, sometimes carved from gourds, sometimes made of tin. Sometimes, if the family had chickens that still laid in the cold months, and that was not a guarantee, there might be an egg or two, hard-boiled and halved. There were no refrigerators, of course. As the bowls are emptied and set aside, the next phase of the morning unfolds. It is not enough to feed the people. The snow crunches underfoot, packed tight by wind and footsteps from the day before. The barn door resists. Frost clings to its edges. Feeding begins with ritual. There is little talking during these chores. The breath hangs visibly in the air. Fingers work fast to stave off the numbness, but still, there is peace. In the rhythm. In the care. Each animal is seen, touched, spoken to in low tones. When the animals are fed, when the buckets are empty, and the barn swept, there is a pause. Back at the cabin, smoke curls stronger now. This is not a story of feasting. It is a story of feeding. A story of tending. Imagine for a moment the sound that wakes you. It is not the chirp of a digital alarm or the hum of traffic. It is something older, something quieter. The walls are thick logs chinked with clay and straw, sometimes moss. Hanging from them, perhaps, are strips of dried herbs, sage, mint, wild yarrow, or bundles of meat cured in the fall, wrapped tightly in cloth and left to wait for days like this. A murmur between parents. The scratch of a match being struck, carefully, against the side of a tin. Fire comes before anything else. It is not optional. It is the line between comfort and pain, between a house and a shell. And so, while others still huddle beneath blankets, someone, usually the eldest, or the one closest to the hearth, rises. Hair is brushed quickly and tied back. Beards are left to grow or trimmed with cold hands and dull scissors. Clothing is layered and then layered again. Wool shirts, thick skirts or trousers, long johns if one was lucky, mittens lined with fur, scarves knitted from homespun yarn. Weather is not small talk. It is news. It is prophecy. A sudden shift in wind, a change in cloud shape, and the whole day pivots. Children too young, mothers nursing babies, elders who no longer walk far. It was repetition. It was routine. But in that routine was resilience. The same hands that stirred the ashes also cradled children. The same breath that fogged the air at dawn would sing lullabies by dusk. Life, however quiet, however cold, found a rhythm here. And in that rhythm, there was peace. A hard peace, yes, but peace nonetheless. The cabin remains occupied, a small pulse in the vast stillness. Fires are fed again. Letters are written, if there is ink. Clothing is mended. Meals prepared for evening. And outside, the day unfolds like parchment, cold and white and slow. The older members of the family often speak less, watching instead, their eyes trained by decades of winter. They know what the sky means, what the chill in the floorboards suggests. Their silence is not indifference. It is memory. Boots, softened slightly by the fire's return, are pulled on with a sigh and tightened with string or hide. Some are patched. Beds are made, not with hospital corners, but with practical grace blankets folded, hides shaken out, straw mattresses fluffed with a stick. Tools are gathered for the day's work. Axes, buckets, mending kits, whatever the cold will permit. Some days it is too cold to do much. The wind howls too loud. The drifts are too high. On those days, the cabin becomes the whole world. But on most days, the work awaits. And so, one by one, the boots step out, into the snow, into the silence, into the cold that bites, but does not surprise. Some are soaked and frozen, the leather stiff and unbending. Children tug on coats too big for them, hand-me-downs from older siblings or neighbors. No one dresses for fashion. Everyone dresses for endurance. Slowly, every movement deliberate, every step a decision. The floorboards are icy, even with straw spread across them, a slow rise from wool blankets. The first sip of something warm, the muffled world outside. Perhaps it is not so far away, this cabin. Perhaps in some corner of your mind, it still stands log walls, ticking fire, wreath fogging in morning light. You may never touch it, but you can visit. Whenever the world is too loud, whenever the cold feels too near, it will be there, quiet, waiting. Cabins burn through cords of it each winter, often more if the structure is large or the wind cruel. Logs split in autumn are stacked beside the hearth in silent, neat rows, their bark dusting the floor with crumbs. Each piece chosen with care, fed to the flame like an offering. In colder stretches, when supplies run low, families burn furniture, books, anything not alive. There are stories of entire homes disassembled and burned to heat one room, families living in the shell of their lives until the snow breaks. But that is not today. Today, there is enough. The boots, left near the stove the night before, are stiff with cold. A spoon stirring something thick, perhaps oats soaked overnight, or beans stewed with leftover salt pork. In richer households, there may be eggs, even bread. But most mornings begin with the basics. Sustenance, not indulgence. The smell of coffee, if there is any, seeps through the cabin like a balm. Bitter, black, heated slowly over flame. If there is milk, it is warmed from a chilled jug. If there is sugar, it is rationed. Most drink it plain. The first sip is not about taste, but about warmth. A kind of internal fire to match the one in the hearth. The firebox is opened, the coals nudged with a blackened iron rod. A breath held, another match struck. And slowly, hesitantly, the light begins to return. Not the light of the sun, but the orange glow of life, of firewood catching, of warmth on its way. The smell is subtle, earthy, mingling with the old wood and the faint scent of ash and wool. Not fast, and never fully warm in the modern sense, but enough to loosen the breath. Snow drifts across the prairie or mountain trail in low, dancing eddies. In the distance, the shape of a barn or shed looms like a dark smear against the white, waiting for chores. But that comes later. First, there is the matter of bodies, of skin, of breath, of warmth. Water must be heated for washing, if there is water at all. Often, buckets of ice are brought in the night before, or drawn with gritted teeth from a creek now half frozen over. Heating it on the stove takes time. And washing is not a full-body affair, not in winter. Hands, face, perhaps feet. A cloth dampened and wrung out, passed silently between family members. No one speaks much in the morning. The world is too large. The cold too present. Words come later, when the stove has begun to tick and the first hints of steam rise from the kettle. To unfurl fingers. to remove, perhaps, one of the outer layers of wool that had been slept in. In some cabins, especially those belonging to larger families, children sleep several to a bed. Not by tradition, but by necessity. Shared warmth is not romantic, it is survival. Blankets made of homespun wool or repurposed flour sacks are folded back with care, sometimes still damp from the breath of sleep. Little feet hit the floor with a reluctant gasp. No one rushes. There is no need to. Life moves by rhythm, not clock. You listen. The wind outside taps softly at the wall. A bit of snow, loosened from the roof, slides down and lands with a hush. Somewhere beneath the floorboards, if you are truly quiet, you may hear the distant movement of mice, or the groan of the earth settling under ice. And within the cabin, the sounds of life are beginning to stir. Rough to the touch, but tightly packed, holding in what warmth the fire has left behind. If the night was particularly cold, and many nights were, the breath of the sleepers may have frozen into tiny crystals around the edges of the room. A thin frost that lines the inside of the walls like lace. The stove or hearth, having burned low through the night, is dark and still. A thin curl of smoke might still rise from its pipe, a whisper of heat left lingering in the coals. But the air is sharp, brittle, and unmoving. The kind of cold that makes your eyelashes feel stiff. The kind of cold where lifting the quilt just slightly is enough to send a shiver running down your spine. The dull groan of timbers shifting in the cold. The subtle pop of frost expanding between roof shingles. The sigh of wind brushing across the wooden siding like a tired breath from the earth itself. You do not so much wake as drift upward, rising slowly from the weight of thick quilts sewn by hand, your breath fogging gently in the still air. It is morning, though there is no clock to tell you that. Only the faint, milky light seeping in through the oiled paper covering the window pane. The soft gray suggestion that the sun, somewhere far beyond the low clouds and drifting snow, has risen. In a log cabin on the edge of the world, morning begins not with movement, but with awareness, with stillness, with listening. The interior of the cabin is a single room, or perhaps two, if the family has been fortunate or ambitious. You lie there for a moment, staring upward. The rafters above are close, darkened with smoke from months, even years of wood fires. If you are not alone in the cabin, and most were not, you will hear the familiar rustlings of others waking as well. The shifting of blankets. A cough, dry and brief. As the fire is coaxed back into being, the temperature of the room begins its slow climb. Outside, the light brightens, but the sky remains the color of pewter. There are no mirrors in most cabins. Appearance, beyond cleanliness, is irrelevant. And always, through all of this, the fire must be fed. Wood is not just a chore, it is a hunger. As the room begins to warm, the cabin fills with soft sound. The crackle of the fire, the clink of tin cups set out for breakfast. Conversation begins now, if it begins at all. Simple, clipped. Remarks about the snow, about the livestock, about the nearest neighbors miles away. By now, the cabin has stirred into full life. Yet some stay behind. To wake up in a cabin on the American frontier was not a dramatic act. It was not a scene from a film or a painting. You may feel your own body softening as you imagine it. Snow doesn't ask for permission when it falls. It does not worry if the roof is ready, or if the firewood is chopped. It arrives quietly, yet absolutely, blanketing the plains and mountains of the old American West with a stillness that could freeze a man as breath mid-sentence. Tonight, as you settle in and begin to slow your thoughts, I'd like you to imagine yourself not in a bustling town, not in a cozy modern house, but deep in the unsettled edge of the world as it was in the mid to late 1800s, where winters were not a backdrop, but a main character. The Wild West often conjures images of dust and desert, wide-brimmed hats and golden sun. But that was only one season of a harsh land, that knew no mercy. Winter on the frontier was not cinematic. It was long and white and punishing. And yet, life found a way to root itself in the snow. Life endured. You are lying down in warmth now, but imagine waking up not to an alarm clock, but to the sharp sting of breath in your nose. Before your eyes even open the cold, having crept through every crack in the log walls through the night. There were no thermostats in 1847, no hot water from a tap. The hearth, if it burned at all, had long since faded to embers by dawn. To survive the winter here was to wake early and move slowly, deliberately, wrapped in layers of wool and hide, fingers stiff but practiced. Life did not pause in January or February. Water still needed boiling, animals feeding, children clothing. And beyond the visible routines lay quiet, more private struggles, the loneliness of homesteaders. Days away from neighbors, the fear of storms that blotted out the sky for hours sometimes. Days the brittle fragility of small towns, where a single sick cow or failed food delivery could tip a community into crisis. And yet people came. They stayed. They built. They froze, and they adapted. It is one thing to talk about pioneers in broad strokes, the covered wagons, the expansion westward, the rush for gold and land. But it is something altogether different to lie in the mind of someone who endured not just the promise of the land, but its bitter seasons. For every romantic tale of grit, there was the quiet ache of frostbitten feet. For every saloon and showdown, there were hours of chipping ice from a well or shoveling snow from a barn roof heavy with weight. There were the unspoken tragedies, babies born too soon in unheated cabins, elders who went to bed with a cough and did not wake, fingers and toes blackened from days caught too far from shelter. And yet there was also community, warmth, resilience that did not always roar, but whispered like breath on glass. Quilts stitched by hand, stories told in dim light, bread baked from rationed flour. Survival was not a matter of brute strength alone. It was often more a matter of rhythm, of knowledge passed down in silence, of knowing when to venture out and when to hunker in. It was in knowing how to insulate walls with mud and moss, how to dry buffalo meat, how to make a single candle last 3 nights. And the knowledge was not held only by the settlers. Long before wagons crossed frozen rivers, native tribes had survived countless winters on this land, guided by seasonal wisdom, spiritual balance, and ingenuity born of necessity. Tipis were designed to ventilate smoke and retain heat. Snowshoes patterned after the paws of wolves spread weight across the icy surface. From furs to firestones, their survival was not improvisation. It was mastery. Tonight, we will walk slowly through this world of cold, not to marvel at its cruelty, but to understand its texture. We will sit quietly beside a family in a log cabin, watching the fire crackle in its struggle against the frost. We will trace the solitary path of a mountain man, his traps buried in snowdrifts. We will listen to the soft voices of women oiling pine needles for tea in a blizzard here, the creak of sled runners pulled by oxen through ice-packed trails, and reflect on the quiet moments when survival gave way to something more beauty even in the stillness. There will be no loud battles here, no thundering stampedes. Only the muffled hush of snowfall, the groan of wind through shutters, the quiet determination of people who did not have the luxury of complaint. We will walk through forgotten towns with their chimneys still standing, hear the creaking boards of a long deserted saloon where once, perhaps boots stomped off the snow before a man sat down to thaw. We will look into the customs and celebrations that brightened the long winter's Christmas feasts, built from preserved meats and hard bread, songs sung from memory when all else froze, superstitions whispered to keep the cold spirits at bay. And through it all, you may find your own breath slowing, your thoughts stretching long like shadows in the pale afternoon light. You may begin to drift, not into sleep just yet, but into that quiet middle place where time softens and the edges of thought begin to blur. Let it come gently. There is no rush here. Like the long winters of the West, this story is not meant to be hurried. In fact, the more slowly you listen, the more clearly you will see, not through brightness or sound, but through mood and memory, and the intimate silence of those who lived in places where cold was not a season, but a way of life. If your eyes close along the way, let them. If your mind wanders to the sound of snow falling on pine needles or the imagined creak of a wooden bed frame, follow it. That too is part of the journey. The Wild West was not only wild in its heat or its lawlessness, it was wild in its winters. And to understand that part of the story is to touch the soft undercurrent beneath the bold headlines of history. The hushed survival. The slow, steady heartbeat of those who endured, not for glory, but because they had no other choice. As we begin this long, quiet exploration, let the cold be something distant, something folded into memory. You are safe here, wrapped in the warmth of blankets, listening to a story carried through time. Welcome, then, to the frozen frontier. Welcome to the winter that did not yield. Let us begin.